Hi, it's Julius here. As you might be able to tell, I'm outside. I'm in Westminster, just outside Parliament. In a few hours, Rachel Reeves will give a spring statement here, about a few hundred meters away from me. And that's also the topic of today's episode. Andrea and Izza will be explaining what the spring statement is, they cover why it's important, and what to expect from the chancellor. But most importantly, they'll explain to you how you can apply all of these big announcements that might be coming today in your exams. I'll send you over to them in the studio now. And I might get inside, it's quite cold here.
Thank you, Julius. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Politics in Practice, the A-Level revision podcast for you, the current students, by us, the former students. I'm Izza.
I'm Andrea, and we've got Cassidy with us as part of our trusty tech team. So as Julius mentioned, on today's episode, we'll be covering Chancellor Rachel Reeves Spring Statement, which is due to come out later today. If you've watched or listened to the news these last couple of weeks, you would have undoubtedly heard of the Spring Statement. This is an update from the government on the state of the economy and how Labour's financial objectives are coming along. This serves as telling the UK and us whether or not they have been achieved. There will be a publication of an economic and fiscal forecast from the Office for Budget Responsibility. It definitely sounds very wordy if political economy isn't your strong point, but not to worry, we will be breaking it down so that you can retain the key aspects for your politics exams.
The Spring Statement is seen as one of the two major financial statements, with the other being the Autumn Budget, which is where the Chancellor sets a bunch of economic policy for the year ahead. This is important as in the lead up to the election, Labour made a strong indication that they would only be announcing one fiscal budget per year. Therefore, to Labour, this spring statement is a review of economic policies so far, as well as some economic policies in the future, as opposed to a formal budget. Today, what we'll be doing is linking the spring statement with the following topics on the spec: Labour's policies on the economy, Parliament, political parties, and cabinet.
We'll be going through Labour's economic policies first. So they generally advocate for a mixed economy, a hybrid system with elements of both free market and socialism, where the government owns some private property. Overall, an economy under Labour strives to prioritise social equality.
So what this means is they strongly vouch for investment in public services to fund things like healthcare and education. They do this through typically supporting a progressive taxation system. So to put it simply, higher taxes for those who can afford to pay them.
Yeah, that's right. They also focus a lot on workers' rights and advocate for fair wages. Keir Starmer has repeatedly said during his PMQs that under his government's changes to the Employment Rights Bill, wages are going up higher than prices.
But with the upcoming spring statement, Andrea, many are actually questioning if this is the case.
Definitely. A prominent figure in Parliament doing this is Kemi Badenoch, leader of the opposition. She actually said she thinks it's more of a, quote, emergency budget, and she was quite critical of Labour's approach to the economy.
And you may be thinking, well, of course the leader of the opposition is being critical in PMQs, that's sort of their job. But this is different. This is a really big moment for the Labour Party. And I guess, given the backlash Labour have seen from both sides of the aisle over the last few weeks, it feels like Badenoch was voicing the opinions of many, not just those in support of the Conservatives. So what can we expect from the spring statement? Because as we discussed in the last episode, the government has already announced some big and controversial cuts, such as the welfare reform.
Ms Reeves could extend the freeze on income tax thresholds past April 2028, meaning people would start paying higher tax rates at the same income levels for longer. In her autumn budget, the Chancellor had previously decided not to extend the freeze, so this is quite an interesting shift in policy. The 6 years of planned freezes to income tax allowances and thresholds could raise up to $40 billion, yet it will push more of Middle England to pay a higher amount. Anything else, Isa?
Yeah, it is a really big decision that the Chancellor has to weigh up. Another really interesting area will be around business rates. So, to explain, if you're not a master of political economy like myself, business rates are a form of tax that businesses will pay based on the property they occupy. So it's likely that a coffee shop in the middle of London will pay much more than a coffee shop in a smaller city or town. During COVID, the government introduced temporary business rates relief measures to support businesses that were heavily impacted by lockdown. These businesses mainly included retail, hospitality, and leisure sectors, or for short, RHL sectors. This relief rate was at full exemption at 100% when first introduced and then lowered to 75%. But this 75% was reduced further to 40% in the October 2024 budget under Rachel Reeves. When she cut the rate, the reason of fiscal responsibility was cited. Naturally, the RHL sectors found this decision to be a poor one as it resulted in an increased operating cost during a time where the UK was holding its head up just above a recession. So we could see Reeves making a change to this later today. Given that these sectors are still struggling due to things like high inflation, reduced consumer spending, and on top of that, the rise in energy prices, there is a chance that Reeves could raise the relief rate again. Ultimately, by doing this, she will be giving businesses a chance at preserving cash flow and preventing closures.
I can imagine all small businesses will be looking out for what she has to say and hoping for a sliver of good news for them. We all know they haven't had it easy these past few years. There's been COVID and the cost of living crisis, which has deterred people from bars, shops, clubs, and pubs. With the summer coming and hopefully some warm weather, this means a time for people to be going out again, and any help for businesses would be beneficial. Also, let's not forget a possible announcement linked to defence.
Yes, that is right. There could be an announcement on £400 million spending on the government's new UK defence investment body to, quote, harness UK ingenuity and boost military technology, according to the Mirror.
This no doubt must link to the Prime Minister's previous comments. He said the UK defence spending will rise to 2.5% of GDP by 2027. Trump's return as president to the largest military spender nation has accelerated leaders like Starmer to act. This has resulted in international aid funding being reallocated to fulfill this rise in spending. One could argue this further jeopardizes Labour's image as the party of social welfare.
Definitely. We touched on this in our last episode, so don't forget to listen to that if you haven't already. But Labour are being very mindful to appear fiscally responsible and competent with the economy. But this could be at the expense of their traditional image at delivering fairness for all, as we saw with the welfare reforms.
That's very true. You can incorporate this into your exam questions if you have one, such as analyse and evaluate the statement that political parties are moving away from their traditional view on the economy. We'll look into some content for this type of question now. So at the beginning, we spoke a bit about Labour's economic policies. Just to quickly recap, they are big on welfare and they're more inclined to higher spending as a result. In your exam, you could definitely counter this with differences in Conservative economic policies. They favour a market system where individuals have more free rein due to less state involvement in the economy. Fiscal Conservatives, for example, are in favour of tax cuts. So the economy causes quite a central divide between the two parties. Starmer has been referencing, in particular, the £22 billion black hole he claims was left by the former Conservative government, so there's extra pressure for the Spring Statement to be a success.
This is potentially a make or break moment for the Labour government and Keir Starmer, wouldn't you say, Andrea?
Yes, potentially. So it will leave a mark on how he is remembered for sure, because there's been so much coverage on this. We'll have to see if it's negative or positive.
Yes, it will definitely affect how competent the Labour government will appear to voters. I mean, part of the reason for Labour winning the election was due to the Conservative handling of the economy. Liz Truss's policies, if you remember, they turned the tide on how much the public trusted Conservative financial policies, and people are really hoping for a change under Labour.
Definitely. So that means the Spring Statement could very much affect voting behaviour in the next elections. We know young people have the highest voter apathy out of all age groups for things like not fully understanding what politics is about or feeling unrepresented by those in power. But what Labour are doing more of through the Spring Statement is trying to establish some government accountability. We know that's a key component of the UK political system. And you could definitely argue in any exam questions relating to the Prime Minister that representative democracy is enforced via PMQs. The Spring Statements released later today in front of the House of Commons allows for MPs to ask pressing questions on behalf of their constituents. This is important as it links to a fulfilment of their elective duties and also strengthens their link with the people.
And finally, our revision tip for this episode. Have you tried brainstorming content and revising with friends? Because I know sometimes revising with friends can be dangerous. You can easily distract each other and your focus levels start to slip. However, if you both lock in, it can be, pretty productive. Talking through content and discussing it with each other allows you to feel more confident and comfortable with your knowledge.
Yep, so it enables you to see what you know really well and areas you may feel weaker on and need refreshing your knowledge on. A good trick is getting a big whiteboard, like if you find one in an empty classroom at school. You can then put a topic area in the middle, such as political parties. Then you can work together and brainstorm all the content you know from memory whilst discussing, and then when you are fully out of ideas, resort to revision guides and textbooks to add forgotten knowledge in a different coloured pen to see what you were missing. This method can make revision feel less lonely, more interactive, and you can hold each other accountable to get the work done. So grab your politics bestie and get revising together.
And speaking of besties, I have been dying to talk about this. I've actually been dying to talk about this since it happened. I think we would be doing ourselves an injustice if we didn't address what happened in the US this week regarding Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary, and his war besties group chat.
Honestly, that is such a massive ongoing scandal, but what actually happened there?
So, Pete Hegseth had a group chat on Signal, another end-to-end encrypted messaging app. It is widely regarded as much more secure than WhatsApp. That's not to say that WhatsApp isn't very secure, but it's used, for example, by a lot of journalists who have contacts who are potentially in danger, for example, and need to make sure that their online presence is kept anonymous. So, on this group chat, Hegseth and other very prominent members of the Republican Party, such as Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and the Achilles heel on this, Michael Waltz, National Security Advisor, they were texting state secrets and their war plans in Yemen.
That's just terrible. But why'd you say Waltz is the Achilles heel in all of this?
Well, amongst all this state secrets texting about Yemen and the Houthi rebels, Michael Waltz added to the group chat editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg. Can I also say that in an article Goldberg wrote, he pointed out that Trump's relationship with the media is obviously not good at the moment, and he feels that Trump has particular difficulties with him as an individual. So this whole thing is just bizarre. But Goldberg received a message request from Waltz on the app a few days before, and he honestly thought it was a trap, not actually the National Security Advisor. And that would make sense given how, the Trump administration has treated journalists in the past. But no, because when he was added to this group chat, he witnessed the key players in Donald Trump's cabinet being involved in a national security breach like no other. They were literally discussing targets, weapons, timings. They then went on to cuss out Europe, calling Europe freeloaders. And then, when they were all agreed, J.D. Vance started dropping fire emojis, eagle emojis, and American flag emojis.
And these are some of the most powerful people in the world, so you can't lie. This is intimidating for the rest of us. You really can't make it up, can you?
No, you really can't. But I guess the only silver lining I can find in this as a potential journalist is it is really the scoop of a lifetime, I guess.
What did Trump have to say about this? I mean, I'd be interested to see his reaction.
I know. He acted like he had no idea, and then he stood by all of them. However, when I saw this, I said to myself, there is actually no way that Trump can explain himself out of this one. I think just how unashamed and unbothered he was by the whole thing in front of the cameras basically just allowed him to get away with it in the moment. I'm not particularly sure. However, like you said, these people are, handling the military of the highest military spenders. It's one of those situations where if you don't laugh, you might cry, because they are literally texting state secrets in a group chat and then dropping fire emojis. It's genuinely unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
It is definitely unprecedented. You can't really blame Trump for not knowing how to react, but he does have a pattern of being quite unbothered when he talks in front of the media. So I don't think he'll address this too much, but we will have to see. On a lighter note, though, thank you for listening to today's episode. Keep up to date with the Spring Statement, and if you have any topics you want us to cover in the future, please get in touch with us via our Instagram or TikTok accounts at Politics in Practice Pod.